In recent news, Trump signed an executive order targeting protections for social media platforms. Now, this is a very complicated issue. If you don't know, Twitter recently kind of censored Trump in a way, not 100% completely blocked him, but he sent out a tweet and they put special, modifiers on it to where when people would see it, they had to have special extensions or some weird way to view it. It wasn't just straight up showing up on their feed like normal. So they kind of censored him on that. And he's arguing, that they can't do that. They're not allowed to censor free speech, yada, yada. So if you'll just look at the gist of what they're saying here, they, for instance, this news article here explains that Trump signed the executive order, and it goes on to talk about, though, like how in reality, despite this executive order, the president does not have unilateral power to regulate tech companies and social media platforms. Okay, that makes sense, right? Twitter is it's a company. Someone owns it. Trump doesn't have any say on what they get to put on their, website, right? Well, it's kind of rocky territory because of this thing called Section 230, and you might have seen Trump mention it. So, here's his executive order, but they talk about Section 230 in it. And I have some issues with the way things are phrased in this executive order, but also am okay with some of the other things. It's weird because kind of got to walk a tightrope here. And I'll post a link to his full executive order right here. You can view it along with me. I'm not going to read through the whole thing because it is incredibly long. But in this first section here, they talk about how the growth of online platforms in recent years has led to these, big social media forums, and it's now the public square. So the government, is saying they have the right to regulate what's said there and that the First Amendment rules apply there. And see, I don't necessarily agree with that because these companies are private companies. They have the right to put what they want out there and choose what's allowed on their, platform. But that's the catch. It's the words platform. Section 230 was created to essentially protect internet companies, right? Because you have all these people that can get on whatever website or whatever you want to call it online, and they can post things. Well, these companies aren't going to control who comes on and posts stuff. Somebody could get on there and post a call to action to go kill so-and-so and rile everyone up and go out and get them. So they shouldn't be held liable for that. Someone else posted that on there and that call to action, and they should be held accountable for that. So they needed protections. So they implement this thing, and it's supposed to be there to protect them from any and all things that people say. People are accountable for their own things they say. But here's the catch. If you're an open platform where you're just allowed to have, or people are supposed to be allowed to say anything they want, that means then you can't pick and choose what stuff people say that you put on there. Because then you would be acting more as a publisher and you are promoting a specific type of content. So if you're registered as a platform, let's say, and you have people that love blue and you have people that love red, you're not allowed to just say, oh, I'm only posting about the people who love red, and their stuff is allowed to be on there and they can talk about it. But the people who like blue, they're not allowed to get on here and talk. We're going to limit what they say. You can't do that. Because of the protections, and you're not picking what's on there, you're pulling your hands back saying, it's all out there. I'm not responsible for it. But when you start taking responsibility for certain things that are said, you now become a publisher. But the weird thing about Section 230 is it grants it's like almost like an alternate route for them to get around and have the best of both worlds. So if they were a publisher, they could then be held liable for all these things that people get on their social media site and say. They would have to regulate everything they see on there because any one bad thing could be held against them. But they don't have to worry about that. People say terrible, awful things all the time on Twitter and Facebook, and you don't see them getting taken down, but you see other people's terrible, awful things getting taken down. So they got the best of both worlds. They're picking and choosing, but they're also not held liable for any bad stuff that's still on there. So why is this? Well, it comes down to some discrepancy in the wording, and they talk about acting in good faith to keep the internet safe. And you can see that in the executive order. It talks about it in this section. This section, I'm like, oh yes, you're hitting the right note here. That this was initially implemented to, keep the internet free of things like pornography, child pornography, or calls to violence, or, things, actual illegal things that were going to be on the internet. And it was protecting companies saying, hey, yeah, you can remove that guy saying he wants to kill so-and-so. That you're allowed to remove that. That's ridiculous. You shouldn't be considered a publisher for that. And so there's this thing where it's in parentheses, acting in good faith to remove harmful content, right? I don't remember all the words they used here. There's a bunch of different ones, but essentially they aren't liable for anything, and now they have permission to remove things they deem harmful. And this is where the issues come in, because now what is harmful, right? Or what is negative content that negatively affects people? Because if you ask places such as Twitter, they'll find things harmful that half the population would be like, no, that's very important. We actually need to know about this and hear about this. So that's where the issue comes in, and that's where what happened with Trump, he was talking about bringing in the National Guard, and because he referenced shooting, some people took that as he was calling for violence, and other people thought that should be up there because, he was just announcing that they're coming in to protect people, and people need to know National Guard's coming in. So this is where this argument comes in, and the issue I have with this executive order is that it's setting its argument up on the wrong thing, but it seems to be attacking part of the right problem, which is the Section 230 issue. You don't want to just get rid of it altogether, but it seems like these internet companies, at least from the way I understand, need to choose. They need to pick if they're going to have all these protections and not limit things, or if they are going to pick and choose what's said. And that's a good thing. They need to be held accountable. But at the same time, you don't get to claim, even as president, you don't get to claim that their companies that they own and started and worked at and can host whatever they want, you don't get to claim that because a lot of people use them, they are now open platforms for everyone. That's a little scary. The government seems to be overreaching there, and I do not like that. So that's why I think it is a very confusing issue, and that's why a lot of these news places, are very angry with what he's saying, and I understand that. They're saying, whoa, you don't have the right. But you do have to consider the way these social media companies are kind of worming their way around the rules and using it as a way to censor people. So now we have to figure out the best way to handle this situation, and hopefully it doesn't end with the government overreaching and taking too much power of these online platforms, because you might be in a position right now where you're like, yes, let the government be in charge of these platforms and, let them have full control. That's all well and good till someone you don't like is in power and in charge. Then you're in big trouble. So instead of maybe viewing it as the government's, try to figure out a way to either, hey, if these companies don't want to be platforms anymore and want to be publishers, let them go that route. They're probably going to lose a lot of customers, and you're going to probably see a lot of competition come up in other areas where people will truly be open platforms. My guess, though, is they would probably lean more towards being open platforms and dial back the censorship if maybe some of these protections were removed. I don't know the full implications of that, but at least that's the way it seems from what I've been reading on it here so far. So thank you again for tuning in for our second segment here. Feel free to pull up this executive order and leave below your comments and your thoughts on what exactly this means for online social media platforms and online forums. If you like this video, please remember to leave a thumbs up. And if you want to be notified when each segment comes out throughout the day, just hit subscribe and it'll notify you when the next one's coming up to watch. Thank you. We'll see you guys next time.